better entertainment experience, please put on headsets. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Zambians will be born out of our blood. We continue to fight. We are such a people.
Everybody's talking about freedom, and everybody's talking about power. Everybody's talking about...
What's up to all you renegades out there? I hope everyone had an amazing Independence Day. In this video, I really want us to talk about Zambia's history, but in a kind of a sort of weird way. And you see what I'm talking about. And to anyone who's new here, welcome, and let's go. In sub-Saharan Africa, I don't think there's a more important natural resource other than the Zambezi, musi-o-tunya, the source of life. It's provided for its people for more than 500 years, and it's probably going to keep doing that for another 500. But the funny thing is, it describes Zambia perfectly. Like any good story, a river will start at its source, specifically in llilonga district in northwestern province of Zambia, where a plaque stands at the source of the river. When this plaque was put down, one man was in charge of the country, Kenneth Kaunda, KK, under the Unit Party. You see, this plaque stands on top of many well springs that actually flow underneath the surface and only come out at around 200 to 300 meters away or downstream. But the major contributor to the source is the seasonal rain. If Zambia is the Zambezi, KK is like the rain. He filled up the country with the dream for freedom, peace and independence. And on that day, in 1964, the dream became a reality. The river takes a hard westward curve before re-entering the country. KK took a hard turn too. You see, he knew the key to a better country were its people, and in 1966 onwards, his plan was in action. The first National Development Plan, or NDP, was put into place. Schools were built in each district, abolishment of school fees at secondary level, increased enrollment sizes, and even UNZA was built using this development plan. Education was paramount in the 60s. This was because most of the country at this point was still rural traditionalists, but like the Zambians, this was only the beginning. Wealth had begun to pour into the nation, just as the Zambezi pausing from Angola. KK was doubling down on his moves from the previous decade. In 1972, the second NDP was enacted to counter the high number of school leavers. But why, despite all this new money? Well, this is because despite the government's best efforts to counter this, even introducing 9 years of compulsory education in 1977, people just didn't like education that much because the most sought after job was mining. Mining has always been an important part of Zambia's economy, but in this period, it played a role in its society. All of a sudden, young Zambian men had money and saw no need for higher education. The 70s were lit. All this money the Zambians had acquired had some good and bad effects. One of the best things to ever happen was zamrock, Zambia's 70s psych rock scene that was releasing hits like Black Power. It was spiced with the sounds of North American and European artists like the Beatles. One of the worst things to happen was the increase in child marriages and births. So many young men were enjoying their money at the popping club scenes, which led to an even worse situation, the rise of AIDS. The 70s taught us that small tributaries like the Kabompo River can lead and have big effects on the larger river. But it didn't prepare us for what was coming, the flooding, the AETs. The Zambezi River floods periodically, with some tribes having traditional ceremonies celebrating this, and this flooding happens to represent the 80s for Zambia very well. A lot of things began to go south. Firstly, Zambia had been in a kind of state of emergency since 1964, and it had only gotten worse by the 80s. There were a few rebel attacks and minor skirmishes. There was even a kind of civil unrest, and it didn't help that KK was not exactly a lover of democracy at this point. And there was even stories of him running elections against a frog. There was pressure from international communities in the form of sanctions on KK's government. People wanted change, we wanted change, but it wouldn't come until later. The crux of the 80s was that the economy suffered, the country wasn't as peaceful as usually it is, and even birth rate took a hit. And the only thing KK had to show for this was a third NDP, which built, of course, more schools and universities. The floods come and goes. Change was inevitable. KK knew this, but in life, shit gets worse before it gets better. At Senanga Township in Western Province, the Zambezi River changes character. The river becomes a force of nature. Its speed and power increase exponentially as many tributaries feed into the river, giving it life and life to the animals that depend on it. When the 90s hit, Zambia's character changed too. The wealth drop that happened in the previous decade pushed a lot of Zambians to religious inclined values, and this played a vital role in Frederick Titus Jacob Chiluba's rise to presidency in 1991. Declaring Zambia a Christian nation and beginning the Second Republic. I swear. But KK, before leaving office, left an incomplete fourth NDP aimed at improving technical agriculture as well as math and science education. DJ was the worst president Zambia ever had, period. Under him, mines were privatized and sold to outside conglomerates. And in 1996, he introduced the Educating Our Future policy that basically stopped government funding for schools in part and transferred a lot of the burden onto the communities. Governments of Britain, Norway, Sweden, and even the USA imposed sanctions on him. All this including the fact that corruption in GRZ was at the all-time high. I am not over-exaggerating. I can genuinely say that this was the shadiest time in recent decades. And if there's any good that came out of this, was that we were born, the 90s kids. And great seeds can grow in shitty soil, just add some water. When the Zambezi reaches the border town of Shisheke, it becomes the father of four, flowing on the borders of 3 other countries, Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. Provides for the people and the animals around it. Talking about a body who pays. But to be fair, FTJ did do one thing right. Unemployment by 2000 was 12% compared to 20% in 1990. This was nothing compared to the legend Levi Patrick Mwanawasa, who took office in 2002. Levi, just like KK, had a strong stance on education, and because of FTJ's 1996 education policy, a lot of primary and secondary schools grew in this period. Child marriages and pregnancies also steadily declined during his office term. But to be fair, it wasn't all thanks to Levi alone why things were so good. Between 2004 and 06, there was a lot of supply shortfalls, strikes, lower copper ore grades, and delay happened in many major copper exporting nations, but not Zambia. This drove up the price of copper. Adding that in 2005, more wealthier states wrote off billions of dollars in African debt, which Zambia benefited from. So what do you get when you have an awesome leader, less debt, and more money? A great economy for a great country, but we wouldn't enjoy this forever. In 2008, Levi, and with his vision for Zambia, died and was succeeded by his vice president, Rupia Bwezani-Banda. RB taking office was short but very impactful. It mirrored that of FTJ, including the high corruption, but it wouldn't last long for Zambia because we had learnt our lesson. There was no stopping the change. The Zambian people were in flow. We're getting to the most exciting part of the river. We're heading to the falls. RB's presidency came at an end in 2011 against opposition leader Michael Chilufya Sata. Sata ended a 3-generation reign of MMD presidents. He was determined to set himself apart from the former. The last 10 years were generally affected by Sata, from rebasing the Zambian kwacha to changing the academic syllabus for the lower higher education. Despite him only serving 3 years of his presidency due to his death in 2014. Dr. Guy Scott, our vice-turned-interim president, held office till 2015 when re-elections were held, where the current president Edgar Lungu won majority vote and has held office since. Right now, we're at the bottom of the falls, the rocky bottom. But the river flows on, we flow on. As Zambians, we've made a lot of bad and good choices, but we've moved on. We keep going, that's our culture. Even if things are hard, if you can't run, you crawl. If you can't swim, you float. There's an ocean of possibilities waiting for us, for Zambia. So let's keep going. Thank you for getting to the end of the video, guys. This video is already kind of long as is, so I'll sign off here. As always, hit that like button, share, and subscribe, and stay FORZZY.
Size them dog. Squeeze it.
Yeah, I got a blunt rolled and spark. I probably sweet on my ashtray. I see lots of hoes in the club, but I'm focused on me and my ashtray. Wait, you got a shiki, what cool, light it up, I got ashtray. But you should not speak to me, bro, cause I only been right with my ashtray. I got a blunt.